Alright, hello. Welcome to another episode of Miss M Tries to Teach You Things. Now I'm going to go over how to adjust the contrast on your images. There are three ways you can do it. I'll show you sort of very basic beginner way. I'll show you sort of a medium way to do it, and then the more advanced way. So first you're going to want to open up Photoshop. Okay, and I'm going to work on my edit image that I already saved from the last tutorial video of cropping and rotating. So I'll drag it to the Photoshop icon and then let go, and it'll open up there. Okay, so if I want to adjust the contrast on this image, I'm just pulling over my toolbars a little bit. What you're going to find when we're making our adjustments is the majority of what you need is under here. And this little, I call it the little half and half cookie. Okay, we always want to do layers, and hopefully that'll make more sense as we go through these tutorials. But we're practicing non-destructive editing, meaning we can always go back, and it's easy to go back without having to sort of rescan and restart from the beginning. So the way, I'm actually only going to show you the intermediate and advanced way because I really don't want you using the basic. Basic, I guess I'll show you just brightness contrast is really basic. You don't have a lot of control at all. All you can control is brightness and contrast, which I guess is kind of just like what you would do in the darkroom, right? Time and a contrast filter. But we can do, but wait, there's more. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to drag this layer to the trash. I don't want that layer at all. Okay, but we still have our background. So the intermediate way, you're going to go to your half and half cookie and levels. You want to use levels. Okay, so what this represents, you're only going to be using this top bar here. The white triangle represents your highlights. The middle triangle represents your midtones, and the black triangle represents your shadow values. So you click, hold down, and drag, and you can see as you adjust each slider how it affects the image. So these are global changes, meaning they're going to be applied to the whole image. Okay, so it's adjusting all the dark tones in the image. Okay, and you can see when I move the shadow slider, it's also affecting the midtone slider, but the highlight slider stays the same. So this is kind of the middle one for adjusting contrast. So you'll increase contrast by moving the two exterior sliders closer together, right? You make your highlights brighter and you make your shadows darker, right? There's obviously my contrast is like that. That's okay. You can preview by clicking this little eyeball. Any layer, you can see what that layer is doing when the eyeball is on. You can see the effect. When the eyeball is off, you can't see it. Okay, so I would recommend levels for the if it's your first time using Photoshop and you're not that comfortable. So I'm going to click and drag that one to the trash just because that's not going to, I'm going to end up using curves. So a more advanced way that gives you more control is curves. Again, you're going to go to your half and half cookie, go to your curves, add a curves adjustment layer, and this lets you manipulate more precisely. Okay, so this is your histogram, these little peaks and valleys. Again, on the left, these are your shadows. These are your midtones, and these are your highlights. So if I want to make my highlights brighter with curves, I click and I'm adding a point to this graph. When you move the points up higher, they make it brighter. When you want to darken your shadows, you add a point near your shadows and you pull it lower. So lower on the bottom of your graph on the y-axis, up is highlights, or up means brighter, down means darker. Okay. So I usually like to do a basic S curve where I just like to add 3 points. I always like to add one in the middle to kind of lock in my midtones. I like to add a point on my curve on the bottom to control my shadows, and one on my highlights. If you want to get real crazy, you could add a bunch of different points on here, but I like to just do the 3 points, and you can manipulate them with the arrow keys on your keyboard if you want, but in general I like a little S curve. Brighten the highlights and just darken the shadows somewhat. Okay. So this image, because I want to keep more values in Lucian, I'm actually just not going to do that right now. I'll manipulate it a little bit more. Actually going to raise up that, but then I want to darken that. There we go. That's a little bit better. Okay. And then I'm probably going to need to burn the sky a little bit later. All right, so if you haven't yet at this point, you're going to go File, Save As, and you're going to make sure this one's your edit. Your edit file, that should be a Photoshop, okay? Make sure the format's Photoshop, and you want these layers, okay? Because then you can easily go back, and then you will save it. I already have something with this title, so I'm just going to replace it, okay? So your edit file should always be sort of the largest quality. It should have the most layers. It should have, at the end, you'll have all these different edit layers. Okay, so that was just a little one for contrast. But as I've learned the hard way, you should save, and hopefully you guys haven't had this issue, but you know, sometimes things happen with computers and you lose your work. So just it's always a good practice to save. All right, so that'll be the tutorial for contrast.